This, I'd like to call this Budget and Finance meeting for September 15th, 2022 to order. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit since we're doing a lot of perfunctory approval of the minutes and stuff like that. I'm going to do it this way and say, is there any objection to adoption of the agenda? Hearing no objection, the agenda is adopted unanimously. Is adopted without objection. Thank you. I'm trying to learn some new procedures here. All right, and tonight we're going to be continuing on with our new business and our department presentations. And thanks to everybody for being here. I know there's an enormous amount of work that has been put into both these budgets as well as the presentations. And our job tonight, as you may recall, is to listen intently and deeply and then ask questions. And if there are questions that get into a place that is maybe a little bit too technical for the on television, so to speak, maybe we can have a sidebar and then staff can get back to us as a group with the responses so that we're all on the same page, if that's acceptable to everybody. And I think with that, we have Mr. Jeff Perigo from Public Works that's up first. Hi, Jeff, welcome. Oh, and Andy Sylvia is in the background there. Hi, Andy, can you see us, hear us?
I can, yes.
Nice to see you. How's the little one doing?
Oh, he's doing well. Thank you for asking.
Okay, we're so glad. We can't wait to all meet him.
Yeah, for sure. I'll bring him around soon enough.
Yeah. All right, Director Perigo, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Matt, can we get the presentation, please? Thank you. Great, thank you. Well, tonight we are going to talk about Public Works budget, primarily focusing on the operations and maintenance side of things. Tonight, we're going to talk about 8 different budgets that we've got in there, including the building department's budget, and then operations, maintenance, utilities, and engineering. That's all, again, a total of 8 that we're going to be discussing this evening. So just as a reminder, our Public Works organization chart, we've got basically 4 different categories or groups in our department: community services, capital improvements, which is basically the engineering and project management group. Then the building department is comprised of 2 individuals, and then the maintenance and operations group, which has an operations superintendent, an administrative assistant for half-time, and then 6 field operations positions and a seasonal maintenance worker. If you'll note that the project manager position has been vacant since March, so about 6 months out, without a qualified applicant at this point, and the field operations folks are missing 1 vacant position. That's been for 3 years now. And the seasonal maintenance worker, that's vacant also. So we do have a total number of positions within Public Works, which includes building 14.25 FTEs. And we do have 3 positions that are vacant, and those all lie within Public Works. So
Jeff, can I interrupt you just for a second? Andy, I just want to do a sound check. Can you hear Jeff okay?
I can.
Okay. Everybody else okay? Okay.
So for the challenges that we've got in Public Works today and going forward is obviously staffing needs. We are actively looking for applicants and whatnot, and we've just had very little luck. Again, we've got 1 position for 3 years. That's a long time to be without assistance in Public Works. We're still dealing with inflationary effects. That's going to go on probably for another 6 months to a year or so before we get settled back to what might be a normal. We have increased regulatory requirements from ecology and other individuals that are really pushing us to our limits with our abilities and our funding limits. So, and then obviously limited funds. We have limited resources to do what we have to do. Again, with the additional requirements that are put upon us, it makes it very difficult for us to get ahead of the curve, if you will. As far as future budget impacts, again, when we do have additional folks that come on board, there's increased training and other opportunities that need to be put forth for those individuals as well as our own staff. Again, over the last few years, we've been probably a little bit lacking in some training that we probably could have had with the COVID situation and whatnot. So we do need to get back up to speed with all of our requirements, as well as the, again, trying to move forward as opposed to staying stagnant. Also with COVID issues, replenishing our office and field needs. We have a lot of tools and equipment that we've kind of been using them longer than we should have. And there's definitely a need to replace those things, as well as, again, copiers, computers, those sorts of things within our department. So for tonight, when we go through the 8 budgets, we're going to focus greatly on the items that are increasing $5,000 or more in the biennium. I know smaller amounts. Again, there's a lot of those that are in there. We've got, again, 8 budgets. We probably have close to 150 different line items or so that we could be looking at. So what I like to do is just focus on the ones that are increasing. We do have a number that are decreasing, some by a small amount, but also some that are decreasing by a significant amount. So there is some changes that come along with that, and that a lot of that does, a lot of those numbers actually are related to insurance, salaries, benefits. There are some, again, with the staffing changes, we see the numbers change also for those items. So just to kind of give a perspective of what Public Works, and this is just a small list of what our small group maintains. That's 110 miles of paved streets, about 10 miles of sidewalks, 3 facilities. We've got City Hall, Public Works. We've got 2 buildings at Public Works facility, the shop, as well as their office. Again, you look at the storm sewer miles, it's almost 40 miles of that, 10 miles of ditches, 45 miles of sewers, grinder pumps. We have all the locates that we do, and then 40 acres of parks and open spaces that are our responsibility. When we've got dead trees, or we've got trails that are blocked by trees that have fallen, there's a number of things that.
Would you speak up a little, if you may, or maybe bring the microphone a little closer? I may be getting a little older.
I am too.
It's inevitable.
Again, that's kind of a very short list, but fairly broad picture of what our folks take care of in Public Works, again, with a small group. So the first budget that we're going to look at is the building department, and within the building department, again, they cover the code enforcement, they cover the permits that are put forth, they do the plan reviews. There's a number of things that they cover in that aspect of it. Again, we do have 2 individuals that work in there. We've got our building official, and then we have a permit coordinator, which is at 3/4 time. So if you look at the largest driver in that budget is definitely the salaries and benefits. And so what we're looking at for an increase in this budget is about 2.2%, so a very marginal amount for that. And within this budget, there's no single items that are increasing by more than 5,000 aside from salaries and benefits. As you can see in the presentation, there's the mission statement as well as the services that are provided in more detail. So the next budget we'll look at is the parks. Again, they maintain, again, 40 acres of parks, 6 miles of pathways, as well as all of the amenities within those parks and open spaces. So what we're looking for in this area is, again, salary benefits are the main driver for that budget. And the proposed overall budget, bottom line, we're looking at actually at a decrease of 4.1% in funding under this budget. Our third budget that we'll be looking at is facilities. As I'm sure you're all aware, City Hall is about 21 years old now, starting to show its age. We've started to do some improvements here with the new carpet here, as well as the painting of the council chambers here. But again, it's aging. It's certainly showing its age. So what we're looking to do in the next budget cycle is to finish all of the carpet replacement, repainting the entire facility, and looking at the HVAC system and ventilation improvements. And again, those are certainly going to be big ticket items. And at this point, we don't have a good idea of exactly what improvements need to be made. We have some idea of some small incremental improvements to be made. But again, there may be some wholesale replacements that we want to look at to increase efficiency, as well as just get the proper proper cooling and heating in all the different offices, because there's some that are probably warmer than they should be, and some that are might be cooler than they should be, shall we say. So,
And Mr. Perry, just on point, for the edification of our new colleagues, when City Hall was built, the HVAC system was right out the gate was not great. And it's been band-aided and band-aided and band-aided for literally 2 decades. And so when you see that coming up, it's something that's really it's been a continuous problem. And as you if you've ever been back to some of the offices in the corner on a very hot summer day, can be challenging down below as well. So the ventilation requirements now, because of the pandemic, have increased dramatically as well. So excuse my interruption.
no problem. Thank you. And future bienniums, we'll be looking at probably replacement of the units up on top of the building, and those will be some large ticket items. So that's a forthcoming attraction, shall we say. So the next budget that we'll be looking at is the street maintenance budget, and that addresses the city's non-salary and benefits portion of maintaining the street network, including the plowing, pavement markings, restriping, street lighting costs, and general roadway repairs and maintenance. Nearly half of the expenditures, if you look in the budget, is for street lighting. That's a significant portion of that section of it. The other two components would be snow plowing and roadside maintenance that we have. So the proposed budget does not have any change in the budget request. It's basically a neutral value. And again, there's no single line items that are increasing by more than $5,000 in the biennium. And to complement the street maintenance is the street operations, and that is the salary and benefits portion of the maintenance we have for our streets. Again, those are relatively big ticket items, primarily for the salaries and benefits. Again, those two items by themselves is more than half of our expenditures within this budget. The proposed budget is expected to actually decrease by 1.2% based on the cuts that we've made for other items and how lean we're running our shop. Again, no single item in this budget also exceeds the $5,000 limit that we had set forth. In our engineering and capital improvements group, if you will, the two individuals that we have is our senior project manager and project manager. That project manager position is not filled as of yet. It's been open for about 6 months now, but that supports the capital projects as well as the planning and professional services contracts that we put forth, as well as pretty much anything else that comes up that needs technical expertise. The professional services line was increased from 50,000 to 100,000 for the biennium to support an on-call program to address unforeseen technical needs that may arise during the next couple of years. Again, that is a placeholder for just those causes. And with that increase, we're looking to increase this budget by 0.9%, so less than 1%. So really holding the line as much as possible on these budgets. Then we get to the sewer utility and the surface water utility. So first, we're going to start with the sewer utility. This one we're seeing at the bottom line of an increase of 8.3%. And the large portion of that is actually from King County. They are raising their rates by 5.75%. And our city budget is looking to increase by about 3% to keep track with our increased costs also. So again, that's the lion's share of the increases that we're seeing within this budget. Again, we've cut as much as we can, but overall, the increase is about 8.3% is what we're guessing.
And on point, you may recognize that King County was proposing over a 20% increase, and the cities all got together and said, cried foul and said, we'll have full scale challenges doing that with all the other increased costs on this. Is just simply a pass through, but thank goodness it's not 21% or higher as the original proposal was initially. It's still painful. Thank you.
Again, we do have two line items that are increasing by more than 5,000 as shown in the green highlights. And again, those are marginal increases trying to get us back to where we were prior to pandemic and again, keeping track with our obligations for continued training and other opportunities that may arise with our staff. The next budget we're looking at now is the surface water utility. This is a budget that's going to be hit by about 12.2% is what we're looking at. And a lot of the main driving forces for that is a lot of the requirements put upon us by ecology and other entities. So we do have a couple of line items to discuss that do exceed that $5,000 threshold. Probably the most important one is the engineering services that we do have in there. And there's about 4 or 5 different items that go into that, and professional services and engineering. We've got support for our SMAP program that we have going on for that. We have funds allotted for chasing down our illicit discharges that we may have, such as the paint spill that we had on the Burke-Gilman Trail. We have funding for GIS mapping, monitoring Lion Creek mitigation, L96 culvert, L60 culvert, and animal acres. And then we also have an on-call engineering support. Again, with being so short staffed, we do need to make sure that we've got someone on staff that we can call to help us track down illicit discharges or what have you. The other major driver, again, with the increase was the dues and subscriptions. We've got a number of different ecology issues associated with that. The annual permit fee, the annual aquatic pest control fee, the ecology's SAM annual fee, Esri's annual subscription fee, MRSC, AWC, Lake Ballinger. So there's a number of different things that go into that $42,000 that we've got budgeted for that. And again, this is the hardest hit or biggest increase that we have is the 12.2% in this utility for the budgets that we're looking at today. So when we summarize the budgets that we just looked at, again, you can see that the first 6, which are primarily associated with our Public Works Department, a little bit more specifically, they all range with either small or minor increases and or some decreases in our overall budget requirements. The 2 that are obviously blaring out are the sewer utility and the surface water utility. Those are the ones that are, again, the biggest increases that we have. Again, 8.3 and 12.2%. If you look at the average, looking at about a 6.8% increase overall amongst all those 8 different ones. I do note, again, if you pull out the King County utility surface sewer increase of 5.75%, you're down to about 3.5% or so, which is certainly in line with what you would expect for a normal budget. We do have 2 other things I did want to bring to your attention that we're pursuing that we do have in the budget, and that is our Going Green initiative. We do have 2 items to discuss, at least present to you. One would be our first electric vehicle. We are looking to get an F-150 Lightning for our public works staff, and that will, I think that'd be a great start for us to get going with conversion over to electric. The other item that we're looking at is our maintenance fleet for our public works guys. When you start looking at the value that you get from going with electric versus combustion engines, it's amazing how much healthier that is for the environment as well as for our staff that's using the equipment. It's lighter, generally speaking, and cost recovery time is probably in the 8 to 10 years. So those are two of the things that we're looking to go forth over the next couple of years and hopefully make a difference with the environment and encourage other folks to do the same. And that is my presentation.
Great. Outstanding. Thank you very much, Director Perico. Colleagues, I know Mr. Perico would be happy to take questions if you have them. Please, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. A question about the facilities maintenance and then the pickup. So two, on the facilities maintenance, does that line item cover like the maintenance that needs to be done during the biennium, or is that also count for some to go into like a reserve fund? What's in that?
That is primarily the maintenance.
It's just what we
Yes.
need for, okay.
Yes.
Is there is that reserve, maybe this is something for finance director, but where's a reserve fund for like larger repairs, emergency repairs? Is there something that we have for facilities maintenance in that realm? Like repair?
Yeah, you'll need to
Yeah, sorry.
speak into the microphone or
We're talking about, are you talking just about fleet? Or are you
Like
talking about
Building
building maintenance?
Building repair, mostly like emergency repair, like,
So emergency repair, I would say that we would put that under the capital facility fund, which is fund, I'm getting technical on you, Fund 303.
Okay.
But it's called the capital facility fund. And any large significant repair would probably go underneath that fund. If it was a smaller repair, depending on what it was, it could go under just the facilities professional service. And we've had smaller ones that have been paid out of that line item. Because we try to keep the capital for true capital, larger items.
thank you.
Absolutely.
And then for the electric pickup, I'm really excited to see us going green, as you stated. I think that's going to be an amazing addition to our fleet. What is the charging station situation for that pickup?
What I'd like to see is a facility here as well as at Public Works.
So two,
Yes.
okay. And do you have a sense of what kind of station those would be as far as quick charge, or just, have you thought that far ahead?
To be determined.
To be determined. Thank you very much. That's my questions.
President Biden just announced 2.4 billion, I believe it was today, for electric vehicle charging investments. And hopefully some of that will be able to come back to municipalities. Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. I wanted to ask about streets. So something the council's been deliberating has been speed limit changes. And I wanted to ask, does the proposed budget have sufficient funds available if we lower speed limits in order to replace signs and things along that sort of nature?
At first blush, I would say we probably do. I have not run the numbers to see exactly what that number would be. But I don't think it's going to be exorbitant where we can't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Furtoni.
And thank you, Director Perico, for your great presentation. I appreciate the going green aspect of it as well. My question was in the engineering operations budget lobbying activity. What are we lobbying for?
For funds.
Okay, fair enough. That's fair. I
That-
just walked into that one.
That helps to move.
Rim shot?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how some of our projects get funded. Yes.
Please continue.
And one other question completely unrelated. So I was just at the RIA 8, the Water Resources Inventory Area 8 meeting, and there's going to be a dues increase. Which fund, you have a lot of different dues subscriptions budgets. Do you know which specific one that goes into, or am I getting way too into the weeds?
I think that's
Yeah,
under surface water. I think that's charged to surface water.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. From the ether there. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, excellent questions. And I think two, on point, in my regional meetings right now with our colleagues, various levels of the political world, everyone's talking about surface water. Everyone's talking about utilities, particularly sewer. And the massive, not only increases from the county side, increases due to inflationary pressures and things that have been put into effect by ecology, which I applaud their work. The problem is they're not giving us money back to catch up, and we really need to be able to find sources of funding for that. Please, Mr. Lebo.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation tonight, Director Perigo. Some questions. But before I ask, my interest is making sure that we are investing enough in our infrastructure. And to do that, we need studies and we need people to conduct those studies. The other is that we are properly recharging so that we are considering the effort required by our staff, that we are appropriately recharging or collecting service or revenue fees to support those staff. And then the other is the level of maintenance that we're doing on our parks and on our streets. So maybe I'll start with, how do we address where we increase our fees that would lead to increased revenue? So how does that fit into our budget calculation? So just recently, we talked about the fee increases potentially for our building permit fees, which presumably would generate additional money or revenue. And so how does that get calculated into our budget? And I would, for example, encourage that we increase our fees at a reasonable level each year so that there is not a King County Metro sort of increase. And I want to carry that into how do we reflect our fees on the surface water and storm sewer system so that we are both collecting enough to invest in our planning, engineering, and our long-term infrastructure, because those require significant capital investments that we need to plan for many years out to build up those reserves that we can do those in the future, or come up with a mechanism to bond and therefore have sufficient revenue to pay the bonds as they accrue. So maybe we can start with the building fees.
I can speak to that. I have spoken to our billing official, and we are currently going line by line to see what our actual costs are per item to make sure that we are capturing all of our costs. So that I can say is coming forth, and we will, in response to a previous discussion, that'll be coming forth.
So how do we fold that into the budget conversation? Because there would be revenue associated with the increased fees. Because some cities have, for example, as I noticed, you had 600 sewer locates, and that takes, I mean, just do the math, there are 252 business days. And so that's a significant amount of effort just to do locates. So do we have enough funding to do the kinds of things that we need to do to maintain? Because I would offer that our parks are overgrown, and that may be a reflection of not enough seasonal work or other maintenance staff to do that. So how do we address those kinds of things? But back to the first one. How do we account for increased revenue in this budget process? Because if we say, you know, maybe we need to have additional effort that could be provided for or paid for by additional revenue, how do we account for that?
If I'm not mistaken, isn't there a revenue meeting coming up where we can start talking about those sorts of issues?
It's kind of a chicken and the egg, which comes first. If you have money, then you can talk about expenditures, but it's hard to talk about expenditures if you don't have additional revenue in part of the discussion.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. It does kind of, that's a good way to put it. It is a chicken and the egg situation. As far as the utility, let me just break this down piece by piece. As far as the utilities go and the proposed increases, as far as sewer for the 3%, and then King County, just the direct 5.75 pass through, that's what the city feels, per the study that was done back in 2005, is still maintaining on the sewer side. Again, what was brought up in the original presentation was that there is a proviso, not so much this time based on funding shortages, but more staffing bandwidth. And I am going to give the credit completely to our Public Works Director that we do need to have master plans for both our sewer and our surface water, which will then help drive this discussion again of having a more accurate assessment of all of the infrastructure within the city and the needs going forward, which will then tie right back into the rates. And then going to the surface water, there have been significant changes on the surface water needs and demands as far as the expenditures, permits, requirements. And as we've seen the capital side, we've taken, the city of Lake Forest Park has taken a very strong step forward in culvert replacements. And it's come at a cost. There are significant projects to complete, as you know, cost-wise. And so that's why the city at this point is proposing, because we were unable to increase the surface water rates on the previous biennium due to the fact that we were just simply in a pandemic and it wasn't the right time to increase rates. But that's why we're asking for a more significant rate increase on that at 10% each year, which is a higher rate to be asking for at this time. But that being said, it will circle back to a master plan being completed and a rate which goes into the operational side and the capital side. And then I'm going to jump back to, I think, the first thing you asked about, which was parks. Parks comes out of the general fund. General fund money, there's a lot of services that are provided out of the general fund, and that's part of the discussions that have taken place back at the retreat. It was brought forward that there was similar to the CPI levy that the city of Shoreline ran. That was something that the council said they were looking at, also evaluating and looking at for the city of Lake Forest Park. The general fund continues to be very tight. And that's a conversation of exactly what you circled back to, level of service and what this council wants to see. If, and I want to be a little careful here what I say, but if the need is to go forward and ask for more staff for to maintain parks, that revenue is going to have to come from somewhere to support that additional expenditure. And I think I answered most of your questions.
Yeah, so let's go back.
And
So let's go back a moment. So if we, when do we decide to have the or when is the conversation with regard to fees? Because fee increases represent additional revenue.
correct. And actually, that's kind of a citywide, I've actually already sent out our user fees for the year. But I don't think that any of them are proposed to increase much besides the building. I'm sorry, I guess that's kind of a separate conversation. But those will probably likely increase and be approved this year for 2022 and future budgets. So are you referring to a specific fee?
Well, for example, the building fee. Would we be asked to increase the building fee to understand the increased revenue before we finish the budget process, or will that be after the budget process? Because you might say, well, we need additional engineering professional support to make up for the fact that we don't have enough project management. So if we want to manage, for example, the storm or sewer master plan, we need somebody to do that.
My understanding of the building fees of when we will be finished with that discussion is actually it will be adopted in this fiscal year, which will also be adopted then in the 2023, it will increase again. So please, okay.
One of my concerns is we don't have enough project management as described in your staffing plan. And there are proposals to develop master plans for our sewer and stormwater. But it wasn't clear to me if we have staff to actually do those plans or to manage those plans.
Wasn't that in being considered for proviso?
It-
Okay,
It is being considered for the proviso. I'm going to just continue with the intent that the city of Lake Forest Park would not be conducting that work. We would be hiring a consultant to do the majority of that work. However, that being said, anytime you hire a consultant to do work, there is still absolutely an aspect of management within the city that has to, and somebody, a position within the city or a couple positions have to have the bandwidth in order to properly manage that, to make sure that it's proceeding forward. And that we have control and oversight of those consultants. And that is the bandwidth that we are referring to that does not exist at this exact moment.
So one way to solve that, though, is that you hire a general, through a general engineering contract to provide professional service. So someone else is providing the management, you're providing the oversight. So not to, I know Andy is very busy, but if you modify his scope so that he's more of a supervisor than a project manager, that is one way to increase our bandwidth. So he's not doing so much as he is supervising. And so if we have opportunities to do master plans, we need to think about how we can actually perform them. I recognize that the work is performed by professional engineers outside of the Lake Forest Park, but we still need people to manage those contracts. So part of the question is, if you ask for $200,000 to do a study, how are we addressing the manpower resource issue or woman power?
I think that's an excellent point that you've brought up. And I think that's something that internally and publicly we should discuss and explore. I think that's something that is definitely worth having a discussion if we, as was previously stated, the project manager position has been vacant for 6 months. We have been definitely had some challenges on how we're going to fill that position. And if it continues to stay vacant, then I think that we are going to have to think outside the box. And unfortunately, I do think that will come a little bit at a higher cost, possibly. So just knowing what we're getting into as we continue those discussions.
Right. But I would suggest that not performing that work comes at a cost as well. And the last time I checked, I don't think if Andy ripped open his shirt, we'd see a big S on his chest. So we do need, I guess I'm being corrected on that. But I do think we want to be sensitive and that we need to think about, yes, it does come at a higher cost, but the lost opportunity or not doing it, in fact, comes at a cost too, because if we don't have a current master plan, it's hard for us to lobby to get additional funding and grant when we aren't current on those things.
I agree.
So
I don't disagree at all.
So part of
It's a
what
great point.
So part of what I'm suggesting is that investment is not just in the physical, but it's also in our resources to develop those physical infrastructure, which is how do we provide the management resources if we don't have the persons?
on point, I think, John, you make it's an excellent point. And I think that in short order, as an organization, we're going to have to pivot if we continue to have these unfilled roles, particularly in this arena. The sewer master plan has really been hanging over our heads since we acquired the sewer district from the county through Ronald wastewater on an interim basis. And fortunately, in that regard, the sewer capital fund, because we've delayed some projects that haven't been burning fires, like probably a bad analogy, but that we've been able to, if there was an eventuality, we have some funds that have been that are there for that. But at the same time, you make an excellent point, John, that we are not able to attract additional grant funds and things like that without the master plan. It's sort of like our parks plan which we got a bit of a pass a number of years ago relative to being able to use our PROS plan as a substitute to get some grant funding, and the grantees were very kind to allow us to do that, but that's something that has to happen as well going forward.
Clarification.
Please.
But the dollar amount for the salary for that vacant position is unallocated and could be used for a consultant project manager, or have we sort of, because if we don't hire them, that money, we have it in the budget to hire someone and have them work for 2 years. It's in the budget.
Correct.
So that money could then be the money that would go to a project manager oversight. I mean, that sort of position. So I think the management funding may not cover all of it, but we have some of that kind of waiting for us in the event that we don't hire somebody. It just may not be
There
enough.
is a portion, yes, correct. It is allocated over multiple funds because as a project manager, they would not just work under one fund. They would work in multiple areas. So it is distributed throughout the budget, but there is a little bit of a safety net, as you're stating, there with that salary. We are hopeful, however, I'm just going to put this plug in, very hopeful that prior to the end of the year, for our public works director's sake, and Andy, our senior project manager's sake, that we will be able to fill that position to get more help for the public works department. But in the event that does not happen, these are great ideas in order to help continue the work move forward in a different manner.
So I would like to see, and I've worked for several different agencies, and those agencies do contract for project management services and many other services because they're short-term and also for expertise. I would like to see how we could support those plans through a process that in the event we don't have project management in-house to do it, that we can, because there's also the other issue, which is we have a backlog of project that do need project management services, and not withholding. I know Andy doesn't have an S on his.
Mr. Lebo, this is actually a place where we could, as we have our deliberations coming up starting on the 26th, I don't have my calendar in front of me.
Correct.
After we have our revenue discussions, a revenue projection discussion, this is something where, as a body, we could consider proviso to be put into an eventuality that we are unable to fulfill this position to keep things moving forward. We would allocate money from certain fund to additional funds to facilitate making sure that we keep moving forward. I completely agree with you. I mean, it's one thing for us in the case of streets, bad enough to have deferred maintenance there, but when it comes to sewer and lack of understanding what potentially is out there, and I know regrettably it's nobody's fault, but inheriting sewer district from the county has, even all these years later, we still don't really know all the ins and outs of it, so to speak. So but proviso might be a way for us to go to allocate funds and say, this doesn't happen by X date, and let's move this way.
Yeah, I guess I would ask the staff to develop that, given what their understanding is, so that if they come forth and say, as they have now, we want to do these studies, but that study needs to come with a, how do we do the project management associated with it? And the other is that I do have an interest into making sure that we are capturing enough of the recharge off our capital management side. Because there is a challenge that I've worked for agencies that didn't always capture the cost of the project management against the capital projects. Just as an example, if you have $1 million project and it's $100,000 project management cost, are you getting $1.1 million in order to pay for both the capital as well as the management? Or do we have a situation where it's $100,000 cost, but we're only recovering $50,000 out of the grant? and the remaining of 50,000 comes out of our general fund. So I am interested to, if we have grants, that we take the opportunity to properly capture our full cost of managing those grants.
Fair enough.
Great.
Alex, yes, Councilmember Furton.
So just to clarify, Councilmember Levo's point, in other words, capture the overhead.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Being sensitive to time, I just want to check and see if there are other questions, Public Works, building, et cetera, right now. Please, go right ahead.
And this is just displaying my ignorance of the city, Director Perigo. So in your report, it says that there's 3,617 residents served by the sewer utility. That leaves about 10,000 residents out. Who are they served by?
Well, that would be 3,600 properties, if you will.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
And just, we can have a conversation about sewer later. Many of you probably recognize that we still do have some unserved areas. And there's a history to that Director Perigo can share with us at a later point, or you can as a sidebar. But that is important to recognize, because that's a bit of a, it's been hanging over our heads for a bit, and hopefully we can eventually get everybody fully onto the sewer system here. I think it's 230 some houses, I believe.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Questions? And Mr. Sylvia, did you have any things that you wanted to chime in and share with us, or?
Well, I'll note that we have been working to prepare for council's consideration award of an on-call engineering professional services support contract. That's those the budget that we anticipated for that is captured, I think, across several funds, but owner's project management was one of those services that we foresaw needing in the short term, to keep some of these projects moving. So it's in the works. I anticipate maybe next month that we would have a recommendation to award for you, and perhaps we can revisit. Well, yeah, I think the budget proposal is what it is at this point, but that's yes, we have been thinking about adding that support. And shoot, there was one other thing I heard that it's slipping my mind at this point. I'm sorry, but
No worries.
Yeah,
Thank you.
leave it at
Thank you for that. Colleagues, any other questions for Director Perigo?
Just a clarification for my understanding. The street maintenance budget line item, that's just for the electricity to run the street lights, or is there something more to that?
Yeah, the bulk of that was the streetlight cost for the energy. Yes.
Do we do anything else on the street lights, or is that all maintained by the utility companies?
I believe it's the utility.
Great. Anyone else? Thank you very much, Director Perigo. Outstanding presentation. Appreciate your time. I think we have Director Bennett is up from planning. Welcome, Steve.
Here, council members, good to see you tonight.
Should have
That's it.
reprinted this with the page numbers on it. I just hate to waste the paper. There we go.
There we go. Thank you, Matt.
We got planning. There's Bill.
And then I push the left and right to move it up, down, up and down. Okay. Yep. Here we go.
Again, not to be confused with the panic button, right, Chief?
There you go.
I
Good
really
to know
don't
it's
feel,
there.
I don't feel like getting tased, and he's closest, so.
Okay, well, I'll just go right into it, and then we can come back to your questions. I might have some additional insights into fees if we want to talk about that in terms of planning too. So just a brief overview of the types of things we facilitated as a planning department. In terms of the planning commission, we're able to get a recommendation from the planning commission during this biennium for accessory dwelling unit regulations, sign code regulations, and a critical area exceptional, critical area reasonable use exception regulations, which you'll be receiving soon. They just approved their recommendation last Tuesday on that. And with council, with the help, a lot of help from the city attorney, we've been able to get the town center zoning regulations and design guidelines adopted. That was a big lift. And interim regulations pertaining to emergency housing, we just dealt with that recently. The council has been able to adopt the accessory dwelling unit regulations. We are getting a lot of input from citizens or questions about it. And then, of course, tree regulations, which you updated recently as well. That was a fairly surgical update at this point, but I'm sure we'll go back to it in the near future. And then in terms of things we're planning for in the next biennium, we still have this outstanding kind of final steps of the shoreline master program update. Really just need council to get up to speed on it, get comfortable with what our recommendations are. The only outstanding thing may be if you want to look at the dredging standards. We've had some interest from the Civic Club about making some changes there. But so there is some money for this, a limited amount, but we need to adopt this in coordination with the Department of Ecology. So we adopt it, the city adopts it, council adopts it, and then the ecology adopts it. So usually what we do is you run any new changes by ecology before you go to your adoption step. So we've got $5,000 proposed for that. Hopefully that will cover just bringing council up to speed, and then that process of the second the agency adoption. And the big project for this biennium would be the comprehensive plan update. We would start with public engagement as far as just reaching out. Some of you were part of that last time where we had house meetings and things like that to get people engaged on a fairly intimate scale. And in addition to larger group meetings where we get some buy-in on the vision, probably want to update that. First steps will be just have the planning commission make a recommendation on here's sort of the scope of the things that we see need to be updated since the last update in 2015. And so our new plan will go from, will be basically a 2044 plan, right? So right now we have a 2035 plan. We're always looking 20 years out. And so I think once the planning commission has sort of a general scope of work, we'll use that to develop an RFP for consultants and get to the point where we've got somebody engaged to know kind of what that's going to cost and bring that to you for your approval. And that will really kick things off is once we have a consultant on board. And I hope that's going to be early next year after we've got a budget approved. Subdivision code update, that's been kind of hanging out there for a long time. We got sidetracked once the town center stuff started and didn't get back to it. But it's not super critical because we don't get a lot of applications for formal large subdivisions where they're dedicating streets and that kind of thing. So that's really where our code is lacking, is just being consistent with state law on what has to be done for a formal subdivision. Most of the stuff we're doing short plats on, it's not that big a deal, but I think that would be good to make that a goal to get it done by the end of this coming biennium. Wireless communications, kind of the same kind of thing. We have workarounds for dealing with our inconsistency with the federal law, but it would be good to update that and bring it into compliance. Stormwater mapping and policy integration with comp plan. This is, an NPDES type of thing. It's, I haven't fully wrapped my head around it. I don't know if Director Caragos folks have either, but it's one of those things that's out there that we're going to want to be able to check off that our comp plan is consistent with NPDES requirements. Oh, it died on me. Do I need to turn it back on? There you go. Okay. Let me see if did I skip a bunch of. Do I need a point? No. A place there, a point. It's on the right slide right now, I think so.
That is not a laser pointer, I think.
Did a couple slides go by? No, this is the right slide. So the big, one of the big things is we're asking council for approval of increasing the arborist hours from 24 to 30 hours per week. And this will be very helpful in being more involved in that long range engagement with the community forest planning with the tree board, as well as getting the more time to focus on the enforcement of our replacement requirements, which is it can be very time consuming to go out and figure out which tree was planted to address the canopy that was lost, and so sometimes it gets put off because there's always this constant new demand for tree permits. So we're hoping that these additional hours will help with that as well.
Steve, can I ask you a question on
Sure.
point? Sorry to interrupt you. Relative to the arborist, because we have had two staff members in that position that have left, is it enough for them to have the 30 hours or so? Would it be better for us to have a situation where there is a certain number of hours, maybe in addition to that, where they're able to do things that are proactive, like citizen calls up and says, oh, this tree might be kind of a challenge, rather than, I can imagine the enforcement side of it could get a little bit, uncomfortable at times. And then also telling people helping them, what they understand what they can do and what they cannot do. I was thinking of trying to figure out a way of having part of that time frame allocation or hours allocation of being sort of positive interaction for them and for the community as a resource rather than just I don't know, is that in part of that 30 hours
Well,
or is it really?
It's 30 hours is kind of just here's something that we think we could all agree upon. 35 hours, 40 hours would of course allow for more of that.
Sure.
And that does happen. That's a lot of what as I found out in the last whatever 3 or 4 weeks since Harvey left, there's a lot of questions just about what should I do about this dead tree.
Okay.
And so we're a lot of it doesn't necessarily require an arborist to answer them, but that's who they like to hear from the arborist on those kind of questions. The initial assumption was that the arborist position should be kind of self-funded as much as possible. And we figured it out. And we figured that with the rates we thought we could charge, that we could get to the point of where the arborist was about 60% funded, which is about the way we can fund, planning budgets, planning staff budgets. We can't really have fees pay for long-range planning, and so some of the duties are not going to be covered by the hourly rate, even for the arborist. But that's really a policy decision that what we're doing here is making an incremental improvement, just like we did when we went from 20 to 24 hours a few years ago, and that helped the job. But there still is this delta between how much you'd like to do and how much you can do, and a lot of times there have been periods where we had some other staff vacancies. I've encouraged the arborists to work a few more hours because we're gonna, it's all gonna come out, in the black and in the long run, because the, assistant planner and the arborists work together pretty closely. There's some parts of it the assistant planner can do, so we can have the arborists fill in for that. But as I sort of look back at all, I'm having to have access to all of Harvey's emails, and so I'm just kind of seeing how much of that's going on, exactly what you're talking about. Here's what I'd recommend that you do about that situation. A lot of times it's going to end up being you need to get an arborist report because that's too involved for me, or that I don't have the certification for that. He didn't get to the point where he had gotten his risk certification, but that is a requirement of the job. So those kind of things will be dealt with by the arborist. It's just how much time can they spend on them when they have to get all the permit, all the arborist reports done for the actual permit applications that are coming through.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies for interrupting.
No.
Please.
The Inflation Reduction Act includes at this point $1.5 billion over 10 years for urban forestry for across all the states. So we don't know what that's going to flesh out to look like, but there's some money that is being funneled consistently over the next 10 years for urban forestry. So that could be a boon for us if it comes to allow us to do some special projects that would allow us to bring the arborist on more full time. Anyway, so we'll just keep paying attention to what that money is going to go to. We just don't know yet. They just don't have the details yet.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear from state agencies once that's kind of
How it
funnels down.
funnels, yep.
But every grant you have to administer is time you're spent not doing other things. So I'm just finding that out in the grant we just got, which is $14,000, and it seems like about a third of it's going to go to administering the grant sometimes when it's a small grant. But if you can get like we're going to get a grant for our comp plan update as well, and that'll be more substantial. I think it's going to be about 6 figures to cover some of the costs that are in here, and so those are off. If we can get that kind of money, it's definitely worthwhile to administer those grants. Anyway, so next slide, Matt, if you're there we go. So yeah, so I was just going to kind of point out that what you're seeing here is the actual trees removed, which I think is more meaningful than the number of permits out there. You can see over the last 3 years, it's fluctuated a lot. The level of activity is coming back up to where it was in 2019 before the pandemic. But these are the permitted trees removed, with the darker color being the number of landmark trees being removed. And then just kind of looking at what does that result in terms of required canopy replacement. And it's really variable because it depends on sort of how many landmark trees removed. Those are all going to require canopy replacement, and also how what was the state of that lot before the trees are removed. If they're over that canopy coverage goal, then they don't have to have replacement at all. And so, but the real point I was trying to make with this slide is you've got a combination there that is equivalent to 3 acres of mature canopy. So just getting out there and making sure those trees are planted. It's not going to look like 3 acres of canopy right now, but if we're making sure they're out there, they get going well enough, they're viable, then we can forget about it, and that's a significant amount of canopy added, and which is great insurance. Even though every study we've done, whether it's a aerial canopy study, or this like the one we're working on now with the inventory where we go out and we do random locations, where they're all showing our canopy is increasing, or at least staying the same. So this is it's really great to be able to just say that look, this is our insurance policy, our replacement plan. So. Okay, next slide, please, Matt. Other thing that is showing an increase here is the engineering services. I'm proposing a larger amount than this last budget because of the review that we're of the Sound Transit's bus rapid transit project. They need a lot of hand holding early on, and they have put in basically $100,000 deposit for that, what they call over the shoulder review. And so so this really just is to handle the the bookkeeping of money going out, and then they'll be paying for a lot of that through their land use fees when they finally do submit applications. There's so much they want in the way of meetings with our engineering development review consultant that we needed to have a larger amount of money available. So we've got that $100,000 deposit, and we're charging against that for all of our time that Pace Engineering is spending on the project. So next slide, please. And then just this is something that doesn't really I don't know that it comes through in the budget. So I wanted to just this is probably kind of just like it's a just one line 4,100 in our professional services. So I just wanted to call out that the sort of the lopsidedness in this first thing, the Excella Carasoft, that's our permit tracking and credit card services. And so the permit tracking part of Excella, they've offered to do a 2-year agreement that saves us some money, and that's why it's front loaded with 55,000 instead of it usually would have been like 35 or so for each year. But we save some money by doing a 2-year agreement with them. So that's the reason there's sort of some imbalance there. Next one, please, Matt. Next slide, please. It is exactly like. I gotta follow the green box. And then the tree canopy study, we're running into some issues. It's more complex to do a follow-up iTree type inventory than it is to do the initial one, because you can just move on to like the next door neighbor's property, but now we got to go back and we got to get permission from the same people for it to really have the validity that we're looking for. We are going to have a fallback plan to add some additional plots where if we don't get enough to be statistically viable, but ideally we want to go to those same sites and see what's happened with those the larger trees especially. And so I think instead we're going to need to go into 2023 to do the some of the field work still, because we're finding that some of these plots are actually on the neighbor's property as well. So we've got to get some additional permissions. So we're probably looking at bringing you a scope amendment on that. But we're going to do as much as we can this year. That's why we have additional 20,000 there as a placeholder for finishing up next year. So next slide, please. We talked about the S&P adoption. That's just our kind of ballpark guess of what it's going to cost. Next, please, Matt. We talked about the comp plan update as well earlier. And so it says here, that it was about $160,000 project in 2015, and we totally revamped the comp plan. And so I'm thinking it's going to be more closer to 100,000, and that, as I said, we will probably get a fair amount of that reimbursed through our grants. Do I have any more slides, Matt? So that's it. That's it. Okay. So yeah, happy to try and answer questions.
Colleagues, questions, comments? I keep looking to the ether, but there's nobody remote today. Mr. Lebo.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Bennett, for the presentation. It was very informative. Did I understand in this last slide here, the 2024 comp plan update, that you think that we can get a commerce grant to cover some or most of that?
Yeah, fortunately, it's one of the few funded mandates. Not very well funded, but it is funded. And so yeah, we have a non-competitive grant that's just waiting for us to apply for. So I just got to get that done by the end of the month.
And so you think that would cover the?
Yeah, it may cover all of that cost. I'm still not sure. I still don't know exactly how they're going to distribute it. They say you get the first half for some, some, and then second half, and I want to confirm that the amount is the six-figure number that they put out there for our city, and it's not, all of you are sharing this $120,000. I think it's the former.
Okay. The other question is, you mentioned that Sound Transit has given you sort of a deposit for the fees associated with the permits. Does that go beyond, in a sense that is the goal that covers your costs for this sort of over-the-shoulder reviews, the other touch points, and the permit review? The reason I ask is because agencies like Sound Transit sometimes have agreements with municipalities to pay for the impact costs of doing the additional review and or support of the project.
Yes, this was an initial step in that direction. We have a deposit that we can either apply to this over-the-shoulder, pre-permit application review, and also apply the application fees too. But I guess, to some extent, there are some costs that are not being covered, and so we're still kind of figuring out how much of my time and Director Perigo's time we can charge for just the meetings they want to go forward. But their position is that, well, just meeting with us to talk about the project is not something that they pay for. But so we're pushing back a little bit on that as well. And some of that time may be covered by the through this deposit. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, I would suggest that you might talk to some of your other friends in other cities about how to what might be recoverable from agencies that have large projects that run through their city, and what might be recoverable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, like I said, our out-of-pocket costs are being covered. The question of the staff time and how much of that, before application. After application, it's covered. So we're trying to just limit the amount of time we spend with them up front, or reach a agreement that if we're spending this many meetings with you, then it's we're going to charge that amount to you. So I've yet to send them the first bill saying we've got about 6 months of bills that we're going to apply to that deposit, and then Director Perigo and I were going to get together and say, well, here's the administrative fee associated with that, and recover our time, the cost of our time. So the deposit will get eaten up very quickly once they really get going, and we'll probably need another one, because that's what happened with King County when they did the trail upgrade.
Indeed.
Mhm.
Any other questions, Joe?
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? I was just going to say, just on point, that I know Administrator Hill and Director Bennett have been interacting with Sound Transit and pushing back very hard on a number of fronts. They wanted to have, let's just say, sort of free reign, streamlined pretty much everything, and a free lunch. And I thank you both for giving them a little bit of reality check. So, and then just on point, I might suggest to colleagues, if you have questions about some of the discussions that have happened with Sound Transit regarding fees and the interactions, I think Administrator Hill would also, if he hasn't updated you on some of those things, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that, or Mr. Bennett could as well. If that makes sense, Steve.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You're
Steve,
welcome. Thank
appreciate
you.
it very much. Director Vaughn, we are on to, I'm going to do finance first or information technology first? Save the fun for last.
Save the fun for last. Get to use our nice, brand new toy. Okay, it's not a toy. Going on to finance and information technology. Thank you. Oh.
Crash.
Right?
It's,
Yep, that was it. Okay. Oh, instant replay. Okay, so going into the finance department first. Actually, this is out of the general fund and our budget is very, I want to be careful saying basic, but it is, it's very simple. It's salaries, benefits, minimal office supplies and office operating supplies, professional services, communications, travel and training, which we are excited to see higher numbers on those fronts because that means we're investing in our people, which is the city's, in my opinion, one of our strongest assets. So it's a very good investment. You'll see that dues and subscriptions has gone up a little bit and that the municipal auditor's expense has stayed consistent. However, as of actually just yesterday, when I was at a conference, they did just release this week that their cost of living increase is going up 10%. So I just want to share that information with you transparently. We're going to leave that budget alone and just see how it all shakes out. But I do want you guys to know that those costs are significantly increasing. And I'm hoping you can hit the next part. Matt helped me with that part. I was really excited about it. On professional services, I do want to highlight that it did go down. That doesn't happen too often. So I want to highlight the good things. And basically what that is that we previously used a payroll service, an outside, like a third-party service called Paycom. And since switching over and doing the conversion to Springbrook and using Springbrook's payroll system, we no longer pay for those fees. They're all encompassed in our software fee. We pay for it in a different format. So you will see that that professional service line item has gone down, and that is why. Next slide. So this is probably our big highlight of a budget change, and that is requesting an additional, it does seem a little bit silly to be requesting an additional 0.4 FTE, but we have a couple of part-time employees within the finance department already, and so they were being budgeted at a 0.6. So if you make it a full-time employee, it's an addition of a 0.4. So that is just to relieve some, alleviate some confusion there. That's the reasoning behind it. And it's transitioning one of the part-time positions to a full-time accountant position. And the main driver is to assist the municipal court with finance-related duties, which has been a strong recommendation from our state auditor. Going on to the next slide. This also is very exciting to announce that we are breaking out our information technology fund, our internal service fund, from being within the vehicle and equipment replacement to its own fund, which is probably more appropriately where it needs to sit. So we are proposing to break out that fund. So you will have a 501 fund and a 502 fund. And if we can go to the next slide, you will see that in 2021, 22, there nothing existed within this. And then we're requesting that this is just the expenditure side, that there will be a couple categories being the equipment purchases and replacement hardware, computer software, and professional services. Just to kind of highlight, I will say that since the city in the very recent past has really worked hard towards moving the IT of this city forward. And I can't believe that when I first got here, we were just talking about finishing virtual servers. And I was learning how to explain that to council members. And now we're to the point of replacing them already. And so that's when you start replacing and moving forward with this technology, it very seems to quite quickly go to where you need to replace that life cycle of the equipment. And so we're there. And so some of the things that are within this budget that should not come as a surprise are there is a proposal to put in to purchase a backup server over in Yakima that we've talked about, that it's a disaster offsite backup and disaster recovery server that was put there. We are proposing to, on the equipment side, replace virtual servers. And the other large thing in that line item is actually, if you turn around, is all of the Aruba, the Wi-Fi. All of that equipment is being proposed to be also paid for within this next biennium, to make sure that because that equipment has definitely is at the end of its life cycle. Computer software, we broke that out. That's the continual things that we pay for. Actual, like Springbrook is in there, Office 365, Adobe, Smarsh, Veeam, which is our backup systems. That's where all of that would be paid for. Professional services, that's going to be where we pay for our KDH, which is our IT support. So if our IT department of one needs assistance in any way, or runs into something where we need a backup if they're on vacation, that is where we would pay for them out of. In addition to the very reasonable amount we pay for the Yakima ILA on an annual basis, and TriTech, which is some of our phone support backup. And I think that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Riddle.
So just a clarification on the Information Technology Fund. So that's not necessarily new expenditures. They were just buried in another fund. Do you have the comparison for what was the actual spent? And is it an increase or a decrease in your proposed? I know they're in different
It's
funds now.
increased.
It is increased.
It is
Okay.
absolutely an increase. And I will just be, yes, it's an increase without the direct, and I don't have my budget right in front of me, but it was in the internal service, or in the 501 fund, and it was with vehicles and vehicle and equipment replacement. But we are proposing to start replacing all of the hardware. It kind of all hit within this biennium. So meaning that you have your servers, there's 3 servers cost-wise in that budget, and that's a significant expenditure. So you'll have those servers, you'll have the wireless, which is a one-time expense. But the way that we've structured that fund is to do the same model, where every single year, if the life cycle on the wireless systems is 5 years, 6 years, that we build that in and we pay for it, and we add to it every single year in order to have the money sitting in the fund balance in order to pay for it. So we will be allocating a smaller amount from the originally, as it sits, the 501, to start that fund with a fund balance in order to prior to doing the allocations, to put money into that fund, so we can start purchasing out of that fund in 2023.
Okay. Do you have that percentage increase available to bring to us later?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I absolutely can bring it
Thank you very much.
back to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So just to follow up on Councilmember Riddle's line of discussion there, do you see this amount, this approximately 336 occurring each biennium?
Those are the expenditures, and no, I don't anticipate it will be that high in the future. As I stated, we've got the 3 servers that are being planned to be purchased, which are a significant expense. We have just done, just last year, this last biennium, I should say, that we completed the core switch, which was a significant cost replacement. So this is just the expenditure side, and I do not anticipate that the 25, 26 cost will be as high as this biennium's cost.
But would you be just like on the wireless, accruing a fund balance in order to make the purchases in future years? So it wouldn't be like, it's 335 for the 23-24 biennium, and it's 150,000 for the next biennium, and another 400,000 in the following biennium.
Well, so the way that it works is that you aggregate everything cost-wise that you think it will be to replace it, increase the cost slightly, and then try to use that on an annual basis. Mainly that works on the professional services, it's a direct, but the hardware and the software is more just continuing. If you're putting away for new software, that just the annual maintenance, that's treated a little bit more like a professional service in the sense that you pay for it on an annual basis, then you would replenish it and have the other funds support it on an annual basis. So it's only the true equipment that you would be using on a, I guess you would say, a true replacement schedule, that you would be adding that revenue in on an annual basis.
So in future bienniums, it would be smoothed out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I think, so the revenue coming in from the other funds probably will stay consistent, but the expenditure side for 25, 26 will probably actually go down, because we absolutely will not be replacing 3 servers in the next biennium. So, for example.
Council members, questions? I just, for one, Lindsay, thank you for this presentation and all your work relative to IT. It's music to my ears, as you know. When I first came on council, it took me 2 years to get them to let me into the server room. And what was there was beyond depressing, but we have made, enormous steps to increase redundancy and reduce latency for staff. And it really is extraordinary. And this is one of those places where I'm really feeling like we're getting close. So that's a very, very positive thing. And thank you for your leadership and the administration as well on this, because I think it's kind of been put in sharp relief because of COVID and having to be working remotely, and the ability for people to actually do that, as well as with that increased risk of intrusion because of remote work as well, and making sure that we have the best that we possibly can to make sure things are secure and backed up in the appropriate places. And so hats off to you and your team for doing this, because it's really a big step in the right direction, and we're really getting close. So Councilmember Furtani.
And thank you again for your report. Just wondering, just to translate into layperson terms, does the staff have the computing facilities that it needs to get their jobs done?
Does the
Does
staff
the
being
staff-
IT or being finance or all of it?
City Hall operations.
City Hall operations. Yeah, I think so. Since we have hired our new IT manager, I think we have been incredibly impressed with what one person has been able to accomplish on the IT front. And so just huge shout out to our new hire there. But yet it is one person. So we always will have to, if you only have one person, which I'm very aware of in the finance department right now, because accidents happen. Happens since, and we've been a little bit short-handed recently, which I think you guys are aware of, due to my accounting supervisor being out due to an accident. So things have been, the city as a whole, I would say staff-wise, runs extremely lean. And when you remove one full-time position from the equation, it can get very challenging very quickly. That being said, shout out to every department because it's not unique to finance. It's Public Works is in it. Police has been there. Planning is no stranger to this game. So, but I will also say that we as you know, we do hire new people. We get excellent, we have excellent staff that come in and work for us, and it gets better and better every single time we hire somebody new. So I would say that it's challenging. I think staffing is a challenge for absolutely every department. But I'm hopeful that this additional 0.4 FTE will help us support not just court, but that will transition into having somebody that also can support and be a backup to our month end reconciliation so that it's not just falling on our accounting supervisor to do it. Because I am a huge proponent of not putting all your eggs in one basket and doing cross training. And it gets very challenging to, it's one thing to say it and it's another to be able to do it when you're extremely small. Because people don't want to give up what they're comfortable with. And sometimes it's just a timing issue of people simply don't have the time to sit with somebody else because they're busy in their own job and there's only so many hours in the day. But that's one of my main things as a leader is that we have to share. We have to share.
Chief, go right ahead.
I just wondered, your question, I think it related a little bit about hardware and software and things that are currently running, and I work really, really well with our IT guys. Fantastic. And what we've noticed is a lot of machines are not running with good memory, and he's been working really diligently going through what is our breakdowns in all of the age in the entire city. And so he's been working through that. So when they've been getting a lot of equipment, just like our HR director today sits down at her desk and she's like, I cannot see this 14-inch monitor. What can I do to get that? So these are things that are coming in to get bigger monitors. So he's working through all of that hardware and software. He's got a plan, and I know she's built that plan into it because I didn't think the equipment was
Sorry, that's true. And the other thing that we've worked through that actually bringing that point up, going into when IT is purchasing 3 servers, what does it look like to actually do all of these repairs? Is it the most important to do the servers over in Yakima, the servers here? And so it needs to have over the course of 2 years, the actual schedule of the capital replacements trying to be accomplished in addition. And that's something that I worked with our past IT manager to create, and because the daily operations can take over in any department. And then the larger projects end up hitting the back burner. And so that's what we've worked really hard in addition to try to not allow that to happen. And the best way to not allow that to happen is to have a plan and a schedule.
Thank you.
So one of the goals that we had talked about at retreat was updating or modifying or implementing a new investment laddering system. Do you need anything in the budget to facilitate that?
My accounting supervisor to come back.
So I mean, you know, it's
And I just, if I'm being, this is something that it is very important to me from the second that I walked through the door to try to change our investment policies for the city of Lake Forest Park. I brought in the economics, King County's economics, that I think it was the head of the department, and time value investments to educate the council to share who they all of our neighbors that they work with. And yes, it is something that is very important to me, and it's probably, finance doesn't get to say that things are exciting that often, but this is one of those things that's truly exciting for me because it's something that we can change that affects every single revenue in every single fund, which is about the only thing that we do that affects revenue in every single fund. So I am looking forward to and will be celebrating the day that we as a Budget and Finance Committee are having the conversation again about strategy to move this forward, so that we can start implementing what we previously have talked about. Right now, simply, it truly is a bandwidth and trying to, and now that we have the first lift of the budget out with the mayor's proposed budget, that helps, but we just need a little bit more, I just need a little bit more help internally. And then once that happens and possibly we get through the budget, then I'm hoping that it is something that will never really truly hit the back burner for me, because I've watched what it's done for other cities that I've been able to implement it in. And it truly is exciting what it can do for a city. And it's, you just have to stick to the strategy. And then it,
So part of the question is, would you put money in the budget for professional services to help you implement that? Or is it just?
it's not
truly
necessary.
Not necessary.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. It's literally just time. It's time. And I got to the point of almost completely having it ready to set up, to start implementing, to come back to the Budget and Finance Committee right before COVID hit. In fact, we adopted the policies in February of 2020. We updated and adopted the policies in February of 2020. And then that next meeting in March, we started to have the discussions, and actually I implemented one, being moving some of the money into the more liquid, or the same, it was a liquid transfer. And that was all that was accomplished from that discussion. And then after COVID started and hit, it was just, the reins were pulled in naturally. And we stopped discussions because we didn't know at that time. And unfortunately, it's the discussions until the retreat, that's when it was brought back up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. I just wanted a quick comment that going back to the point 4 to help assist the court. In my humble experience, if the auditor recommends something, that drives your decision-making process usually. So thank you for having that in there, and just food for thought, everyone, because it is an addition, but if they're suggesting it, it makes a lot of sense. So any other questions, everyone? Great. Thank you so much, Director Vaughn. Excellent presentation. And if you haven't had a tour of the IT department, I'm sure Aaron would be happy to set it up at some point when he's not too busy, but the cabling is getting to be to a point of artwork, which I really appreciate. That's the geek in me speaking. Before we move on to public comment, are there any questions or comments? We'll be talking next week. We'll have a revenue projection, I believe, on the next Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And we do have, not necessarily germane to this body, but we do have a committee of the whole meeting on Monday evening, just as a heads up. So with that, I'm sorry, Councilmember Goldman.
Well, just germane to that, will the revenue projections next week, will that also include kind of a summary of all the levers that the council can pull in terms of sales tax, things like that?
That's a great question. I think it's actually 2 weeks. I'm sorry, I don't have my computer in front of me. It's is it next week? Next Thursday?
So on
Yeah.
the next meeting on Thursday,
Thursday.
next Thursday,
Yes, thank you.
I'm drawing a blank if that's the 21st or 22nd. Next Thursday is date
There
wise.
we go. Works for me.
That meeting is only about 45 minutes. So I'm not sure if we will have time to start in on that next level discussion. If we do not have time to start in on that discussion, then it would be the following Monday as council deliberations start, to put a placeholder in to start the discussions there. If we do have time, then we will, then there's no need to hold back on starting that conversation and those discussions on Thursday.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Vaughn. Yeah, we have lots of things that we have to take care of in addition to the budget coming up next week as well. So thank you for the question, Councilwoman Goldman. And with that, let's open public comment. If you'd like to make public comment, please use the raise hand function. And again, keep it respectful. 3 minutes, please. Matt, do we have anybody looking to make public comment?
It doesn't look like, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I will close public comment at this time. And if there are no objections, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna have to start wearing a turtleneck. I'm freezing up here.